So if this plant is unrecognizable to you, it is actually potatoes. And you can see the soil in the background looks fairly wet in a garden. And they did comment that in this particular case, they had also seen some of this last year in their garden. Another gardener sent these pictures in of tomatoes, and you see that same weird, curly, gnarly growth at the top of the plants. And other interesting things of note in the background, you can see in the first picture a squash plant and corn in the other one. So you notice that the soil around the plants kind of looks darker here, like maybe they've added something. And also got these pictures. So these were some samples brought into a county extension office, and they took some pictures and sent to me. So all of these, the issue was herbicide carryover in manures that they had applied to their gardens. And interestingly enough, some of them were different sources of manures. Well, of course, these questions have been coming in from lots of different places, so different manure sources. And they had applied manures to their gardens, thinking that they were going to help the garden. However, these manures were contaminated with a herbicide. So there are some pasture herbicides that control broadleaf weeds in the pastures. So the pastures are getting rid of their weed problem and have grasses either to make hay or to be a pasture. And the animals eat either that hay that has been treated or grazing in the pastures. And that herbicide carries through the animal and through the manure. And then when applied, even if composted the proper amount of time, all of those things, that herbicide is still active. And you notice that tomatoes and potatoes are particularly sensitive to it. So in this particular one, I was kind of curious about the squash in the background, not really showing any signs, but squash doesn't seem to be as sensitive to it. And she also told me that as we got to talking that they had applied more manures, particularly on the tomatoes. Corn will be just fine because corn is a grass plant and that herbicide just goes after broadleaf weeds. So corn, perfectly fine, not going to affect it at all. There are several particular herbicides that do this that are applied. So we can also get some of these signs with drift events, but it just so happened that all the cases I've had 3 or 4 questions in the last week, all of the cases that I have talked to the growers have all been from manure applications. So in the garden, honestly, I would steer away from using manures. You really have to know your source and history and know where your hay comes from, know that pasture, know the farmer if it's you, or the neighbor or somewhere else. So in particular, be very sure of that source if you are going to use it. The other caveat with using manures in the garden is there can be food safety concerns when we use manure products. So a piece of advice might be just to stay away from manure products in the garden because there are other soil amendments and organic matter that we can add to the soil in different ways where we don't have to worry about contamination issues.